Hello again. I'm Bob Starr representing the Faraday Foundation and Faraday Studios. I'm here with Jake Wizard 4. In our first Science Wizards Retrospectives video, Jake presented an overview of the four science wizards beginning with Michael Faraday. Jake, now let's go deeper into Faraday's scientific contributions and legacy as the most popular science communicator of his day. To begin, what were his most important discoveries and inventions?
Well, Bob, Faraday discovered and invented so many things that you say which is the most important is up for debate. He's best known for some in basic chemistry. You know, they were isolating chemical elements back in his day that periodic chart had not filled out very far. He helped do some of that chemistry work in isolating benzene, I think, and that's a molecule. But he's probably best known for his work in electrostatics, electricity. He's one of the fathers of almost everything electric. This year we're celebrating the 200th anniversary of his development of the electric motor. And he also contributed to developing an electric generator. He's the fellow that figured out that when an electric current is moving, it creates a magnetic field. And conversely, a magnetic field can make electrons move, even though he didn't know what electrons were there. He knew there was something, this electric current. But he could get that current to move with a magnet, and he could make a magnetic field with a moving current. So he applied all those, and people were stunned at the things he did. You know, he made a little electric motor, the very simple one where he had a pool of mercury and a wire, and they ran current through the wire. The wire would start to skittle around in the mercury, and everybody, how are you doing that? And so he was at the very beginning of putting electricity to work, and that's probably his largest and best known contribution to our planet's
In my
existence.
research, Jake, I came across the term Faraday cage. Can you tell us what that might be?
Well, everything, there's a lot of Faraday named things, right? And a Faraday cage is just a concept of, it's almost like having a screened in porch. I want to keep the mosquitoes out. So how do I keep out radio signals or electric fields, magnetic fields that are being generated somehow? Well, he discovered that he could put a series of wires or a mesh of wires, and that magnetic field that he created would not pass through it, right? And you say, well, where in the world do you think he got that idea? Well, I think, this is my personal thing. See, he worked for Sir Humphrey Davy. And I'll just stand up here in the studio and get it. This is kind of cool. I think we're just working off the cuff here. This is great. I'm going to grab it. Just a second. Let me go grab this. So I have right here from the Royal Institution of Great Britain, they call this a Davy safety lamp. And this was developed 20 or 30 years before Faraday did his work with the electric motor. But Sir Humphrey Davy, his leader at the Royal Institution, was trying to find a way to light up a mine without blowing up the gas. Because the miners were dying, you know, when they'd hit a pocket of gas and it'd blow up like that. And they'd have to take candles down in the mine or acetylene lamps. And of course, if you hit a dust pocket or some gas, set it off, there you go. So how do you have a candle that won't cause an explosion? And Davy came up with the notion of putting the flame inside a wire screen. And so that the light could pass through the candle, but the flame would not pass. So if gas came through here, it could go through the small holes and it would start to crackle inside. The gas would get in, but the flame could not get back out because this wire screen conducted the heat away, cooled it down. It was such a simple thing. Now Faraday saw this thing setting around his lab. You know, he saw that, and Sir Humphrey Davy was, you know, considered a genius for coming up with this device. And can't you imagine, I don't know this, but I can just imagine Faraday saw this and he thought, I wonder if this phenomena would stop my magnetic field. I don't know, but that's the kind of stunt I would pull if I could use the boss's idea and apply it to something else. So that's kind of cool. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm sure there'll be some historian that'll say, yes, it is. I hope so.
And now that you've done a demo, I think you've whetted our audience's appetite. So would you present for our viewers one of Faraday's original science demonstrations?
Besides being this great electrostatic physicist and chemist, he was a great science communicator. That's probably how he's best known. And I'll show you a picture of what I'm going to. So here's a 20-pound note, and we'll get a close-up of it, but this is a $20 bill, or a 20-pound note, and a special edition one. And this is the back side of it. And there's Faraday. Imagine having your picture on the back of a $20 bill. I mean, that's quite the honor when you think about it. And there he is at the Royal Institution in front of an audience, and supposedly in this engraving, the king and his son are sitting there, and he's explaining something. And this kind of depicts his most famous lecture, the candle lecture, the chemical history of a candle. And as I was told when I visited the RI several times, the question was, they put candles on Christmas trees. And some lad would ask, well, what is this yellow stuff? What's it made of? And people didn't have a quick answer. And the people today, I say, what is that yellow stuff? And they say, well, it's a flame, it's heat. And so he went through a very elegant series of demonstrations to explain the chemical nature of a flame. And I have to realize this was their main light source at the time. And part of Faraday's salary package at the Royal Institution was so many shillings a week plus a candle allowance. Because, when the sun went down, if you didn't have candles, you were out of luck, or a whale oil or something like that. So candles are very important. That's why this took on a greater importance than what we've got. So this was one of Faraday's demonstrations, and you can do this if you have a candle. So here's a candle similar to what Faraday would have had. I think this one's a little cleaner. Back in his day, the candles were maybe not as pure as these, so they gave off a little more smoke. So the effect I'm going to show you would have been more dramatic back in his day. He was trying to demonstrate in his candle lecture that it's not the solid wax that's burning, nor is it the liquid wax, that pool of liquid that you'll see in there that's burning, but it's the vapor. It's the gas, the third state of matter, solid liquid gas. It's the gas that's burning. And the way he would demonstrate that, and he'd have this taper lit, and he'd blow it out very quickly. And I want you to watch the flame here. 3, 2, 1. Oops, I can't even blow it out. It shows how old I am. Did you notice anything there? Did you notice how that flame jumped back down to the wick via the smoke? So I'll try it again now. Ooh, jumped about that far. And Faraday, using one of those, I won't say dirty old candles, but that probably had more fat and stuff in it than these do, more tallow or whatever, he could get that flame to jump quite a distance. And it just demonstrated that stream of smoke that came off those vapors is what's burning in a candle flame. And it's very simple, but very elegant. And I know everybody, now that I've showed you this, everybody's going to try it. They're going to go home and say, I got to try this activity. And that was just one activity in his chemical history of a candle. And if you go online, check this out. So I just bought this on Amazon, The Chemical History of a Candle, right? And when was this published? Or printed, this thing right here. 2013, so it's a few years old. So there it's printed. The original was printed in 1861. There it is. That's the book. Now the lecture was given 40 years before that, but there's the original. That's kind of cool. And that book has been around the world, The Chemical History of a Candle. I don't know how many languages, but it's very elegant. And I'll just read, what could I say? This is my message to young people that was reading this thing. Among the readers of this book, some few, he's talking about me maybe the wizards, I don't know. Among the readers of this book, some few may devote themselves to increasing the stores of knowledge. The lamp of science must always burn. Isn't that amazing? Oh, here's another line I'd like to read. This is him talking to young scientists. Atom by atom, link by link, has the reasoning chain been forged. Some links too quickly and too slightly made have given way and have been replaced by better work. But now the great phenomena are known. That's amazing. And in wonderment, the cunning artists are filling the minds of children who now master the thoughts once known only by Aristotle. Essentially he's saying, you know, wow, just understanding how this the chemical nature of this candle was something that, 2,000 years ago, people were just in stunned amazement. How could this possibly happen?
That leads well into my next question, Jake.
Yeah.
Michael Faraday certainly stood on the shoulders of some of the scientific giants of his time. You mentioned Davies. Then he became one himself as a direct result of reading some of their books and working directly with them. Can you talk about the importance of apprenticeships for Michael Faraday as well as for yourself?
I'm so proud of Michael Faraday because his life, you think here's this grand man who's on the back of a 20-pound note, and everything, all sorts of things are named after him across the planet. And the Queen herself let him live in Hampton Court, Queen Victoria, when he got old to retire. She let him move into the castle there to live. He's such an honored man. But he started out, his father was a blacksmith, which meant they were just one step above being poor. It was hard, dirty work. And he went to grammar school, which probably was 4 or 5 years at the most. And he was not a mathematician at all. He didn't do well with math. And so you read his biographies, he was kind of ashamed of his dirty hands. His grubby. And that being a help, you can imagine what it was like to help a blacksmith work. Lugging wood and coal and cleaning up things and bending hot metal or whatever it is they did. So he was very sensitive about that, and he wanted to improve himself. And so when it came time for him to become an apprentice, because most kids did, they at age 12 or so, they were moved in sometimes with a master of some trade and learned that trade and would spend several years as an apprentice. He did not necessarily want to be a blacksmith like his father. He loved his father. So he just wasn't. So he apprenticed to a bookbinder because he loved to read, and he apprenticed himself to Rebo's bookshop. I forgot the name of the street. I used to know the name of the street. But here's this, and he was a bookbinder. But of course, back in those days, when you got a book, many times the book was not bound. You just got pages, loose pages, wrapped up with string. And depending on how much money you had in your pocket, you would take it to the bookbinder, and maybe they would put it in the kind of leather or the design that you had in your house, so it was kind of a customer. So Faraday would spend his spare time reading some of those books that came through. And I think one of the big ones, there were 2 of them, and I've got copies of them here. One was on how to think wisely, and the other one was an introduction to chemistry. And he loved those books, and he would, I guess, borrow them, maybe took them home, or wherever he slept, he would read those books. And he apprenticed being a bookbinder, and I think without that, and without having the exposure to all those ideas that came in the books that he got to read while he was working on them, it was probably the life-changing point. Which was culminated, I guess the deal was a customer came in and saw him reading the books with such verve He said, "Are you interested in this natural philosophy?" And he said, "Yes, sir, I am." He said, "Well, I have tickets to a lecture at the Royal Institution. Would you like to go?" Are you kidding me? You know, what a chance. So Faraday, being an apprentice bookbinder, learning that trade, got to go to the Royal Institution to see Sir Humphrey Davy's lecture. And Faraday sat up high on a back row and took notes and essentially wrote Davy's his lecture out verbatim. And then he took all that back to his bookbinding shop and wrote this beautiful book by hand, and he illustrated it by hand, and he bound it with his best work and took it to the Royal Institution to present it to his hero, Sir Humphrey Davies, who I'm sure he teared up when he saw that book. He went, "Oh my gosh," couldn't believe it. Gave Faraday a job at the Royal Institution. And I think it rattled poor old Faraday's cage quite a bit to say, "Oh, not only am I leaving the being a blacksmith, and I'm not going to spend the rest of my life, even though he loved it, binding books. I'm going, oh my gosh, to the Royal Institution." And he started at the bottom, but over his lifetime, he worked his way to the top. He was director, you know. And there's still the Faraday chair there, you know, at the Royal Institution. And there's a Faraday laboratory, which looks familiar to something in your background. Your background is Faraday's laboratory, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, it's a picture of the setup of the lab that's at the Royal Institution. And what I'm impressed with is how well organized, and I don't know if it was in Faraday's time or that was an aspect of Faraday's operation in his lab. He had to keep things fairly.
No. Oh, no. Then we know why that place is spotless. Is when you look at Faraday's writing, his notes were, he wrote them like he was writing the Declaration of Independence. His penmanship was like incredible. But he numbered every paragraph that he ever wrote. It was like paragraph 9,177, and he'd write it, whatever he write. And then paragraph 9,178, he kept just meticulous. You go, oh my word. And he did it by candlelight with pen and ink, you know, quills. And I'm going, oh, geez. It's amazing.
Well, Jake, on to our next question. That was great, by the way. You've given us some insight into the unique aspects of his growth as a scientist, and being an apprentice of Davies was certainly.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'll interject. That when he made all these great discoveries, right? I mean, he just did all stuff. But his first real assignment, like, okay, you're one of the guys here now. Now that you're maybe no longer a complete apprentice, maybe you're a journeyman, whatever the middle area. They gave him the task of making clear glass. It's like, clear glass. Well, the British folks would buy their glass from Germany and Switzerland because they knew how to make crystal clear glass that you needed to make telescopes. And of course, you know, the British were big in the Navy, I guess need to say, the British Armada. And so they were the masters of the sea. And you had to have lenses, you know. But to make that glass, they had to rely on outsourcing that. So they were desperate, I guess, to get our own clear glass. So who did they assign that task to? Michael Faraday. And he had to, and when you go to the museum there at the Royal Institution, he's, here's his disc of glass, and here's one 2 years later, a little bit clearer, and here's one. How long did he work on? 10 years. 10 years. Now you say, well, okay, 10 years, but just think about this. In order to melt glass, what do you have to do? Now you're in downtown London, and you have to have a flame hot enough to melt sand. You know, I don't know what that temperature is, 1,500, 2,000 degrees. You got to have a bellows pump. You're going to have fuel. It's going to be smoky and hot, and you have to get the glass pure. and you have to monitor the ingredients because you're trying to figure it out. And he made thousands and thousands of samples trying to get them purified. I thought, boy, the amount of work and all the failures, just thousands of failures. I mean, that tells you a story. Yeah.
I did want to back up a little bit, and I know you're going to talk about your apprenticeships with the other wizards in more detail when we get to those in future segments. But can you say a word about the importance for you of those kinds of relationships?
In my personal experience, when you come into any new thing, especially in science, 'cause it's walking into a scientific scenario, everything is so precise and accurate and detailed, and you're going, oh, this is it's almost scary. Can I even begin to be this clean and precise and pristine and focused and dedicated? And you go, that's hard. And you don't know even where to start. Being an apprentice, the master can say, look, of the 10,000 possibilities of things that are going on through your head, you only have to think about 3. I do? Which are they? It saves a lot of time. It's like the early pioneers going across the Americas. They say, we're going to go to California. How do you get there? Go west. And you're going, but where? It was so nice to have some trails laid. Say, well, you probably want to either go this trail. You can go make your own trail if you want. But a lot of guys died out there making the wrong trail. So the idea that you have a master that knows the lay of the land and says, well, this is kind of hard, but this is probably the best way to go. And maybe you'll find another route once you get out there. So the idea of having a master, to being an apprentice under a master, I will say it's time saving, and you'll probably be more successful on the other end. Because when you work with a master, you're also working your way into his network of friends and associates, and you'll learn the lay of that land too. And then you'll pick up the skills that he's probably lost a couple fingers to. And maybe you don't have to lose as many fingers as your master did.
That's great. A great answer, Jake. That's a great analogy to going out west. As the first wizard, what were some of Michael Faraday's techniques for communicating science and capturing the attention of diverse audiences?
Well, in his day, you got to realize you have to just peel back the notion. You said, well, there was no television, no radio. Public speaking was the main source. Doing lectures. People would go to lectures all the time. Like we would go to the movie. There were no movies. They did have magic lanterns. They had glass slides. They could throw an image on the wall. That's about the audio visual they had. No amplifiers. So the whole idea of being a lecturer, that was a deal. He went to many classes on how to present himself, self-improvement, and they would have a debating society. He went way out of his way to become a good lecturer. And it was all oral. Because, printing a book was a big thing. But and owning a book was a luxury. So mostly it was me telling you or telling an audience, And so you can get a book, and I should have brought one down for this. Maybe I will when I get to presenting what I'm doing. That he wrote a book on how to present. And when you read it, you go, oh my word. This man is crazy. He put in so much work. He said, you will rehearse your lecture how many times? He said, the words should flow out of your mouth like honey. And you should know every point you're trying to make so you can guide the audience, and you need to captivate their mind, and they'll just flow with you so smooth and easy to what you're trying to guide them. And you can point out the beautiful vistas to see. And he said, but in order to do that, every period, it's got to be just smooth and correct and accurate. And I'm going, oh, really? wow, you have to do your homework. So he was, that's the way he did his writing and his artwork, his illustrations were just spot on. So his techniques were, rehearse, and accurate. And he said, when people look at an object, you want to make sure. See, if I have you look at this candle, now what am I wanting you to look at? Is it the actual, most people say, what's the flame, right? He said, well, maybe it's the dripping, or maybe it's this handle down here, or maybe it's the burnt matches. I mean, you don't know. There's 200 things you could look at here. So the lecturer said, you've only got so much time. So he said, you have to, may I direct you to the flame? It's just, but he would do it with his body and his hands. May I direct you to the flame? So you go right to it. Wow. I thought, wow. But he did it with such, what I would pay to sit in on one of his lectures, to hear his voice. Oh, man.
Is there anything else you would like to add or to share with us before we close?
Faraday was a wizard, and he didn't know it at the time. Queen Victoria everybody called him Father Faraday. He was kind of like, I don't know, Science Santa Claus, or I don't know how it was, but he was so revered, people would tip their hat. And when he died, the Queen said, here lies the wisest one among us. Because so much beauty goes on in the world, we would not have even known this stuff was going on without Faraday pointing the way. He was so honored. And they found all of his medals. He won awards. He was a fellow of this and honored this way and the Cross of Honor. All these things. He kept all in an old can. All his medals were in a little pile in a can, And I thought, oh, wow. There they are. The Nobel Prizes of their day, and what's he got them? In an old coffee can up on the shelf. I go, oh, well. I think humble was the word, the whole concept. And he was a very, very devout religious man. Very, very. And he lived his religion. He was an exemplar of his beliefs, and being humble was a big ticket item for him. And the idea also of serving mankind, that's why he stayed at the Royal Institution. Their motto there is the science of common purposes. They were trying to solve day-to-day problems. How do we solve this problem? And so that's why he applied himself, because he was actually solving great problems of the day.
We're certainly beneficiaries of his discoveries and his hard detailed scientific work. We would not be doing this via a distance or putting it on our hard drives if it weren't for the initial, for the pathfinders there, as you mentioned before. All right, Jake, thanks again for gathering your thoughts for us and helping us better understand Faraday's enduring legacy. And in our next program, Jake will go in depth about Wizard 2, Hubert Allier.